Government and military leaders around the world were pulled from meetings or their beds, and sometimes from the beds of others. Heads of two different states were roused in each other's company. Quick response teams were swiftly notified and convened in person or by video conference. The military's rapid dissemination of information was not matched in the civilian sector. As one might expect, the onset of the event was so shocking that few people who witnessed it from the safe side recovered their wits quickly enough to think of capturing it with their phones before the plane of destruction had moved beyond the horizon in little over 1 minute. In addition, the entire BBC complex had resided at the heart of London's modern city centre. And every studio, every editing bay, every camera were no more upon the earth, and the technicians and on-air personnel were largely incapacitated further. London's entire communication infrastructure had been dealt a nearly fatal blow. Save for the few satellite uplink vans stationed on the east side that day, initial social media posts were largely confined at first to textual accounts and images of the aftermath, save for those few individuals who had already been capturing video before the moment of inception and continued to do so. Still, the magnitude of the disaster was so broad that hardly any posts with visual documentation of the event itself were published until after those on the scene had attended to their immediate needs and of those around them. Being the most extensive metropolitan area right at the point of inception, however, the east side of London quickly became not only a communication hub and clearinghouse for information, both outgoing and incoming, but would later be a staging point for the first frantic scientific studies of the ongoing phenomenon, obviously driven with a great sense of urgency. But this had not happened yet, when first images were posted documenting the results of the devastation seen from the Royal Observatory across all of remaining London. A few showed the swarm of humanity climbing over itself to reach the safety of the other side immediately after the event had passed. This flood of bodies, however, had gradually lessened to become a rush, then a flow, and by the time Nodak had gone dark was no more than a trickle, as all who were close enough to see the promise of safety and physically able to move had crossed over, or were well on their way to doing so. Rescue teams and law enforcement had been quick to respond all along the Meridian line, but within minutes it was understood through experience that no vehicles nor equipment could penetrate beyond the interface between the affected and unaffected areas. Training and courage, however, led rescuers, men and women of the cloth and those of compassionate hearts, to band together and walk headlong into the melee to assist the injured, comfort them if they could not be moved, and carry them to safety if they could, while ambulances, medical personnel and support materials gathered at the edge of the zone. One particularly resourceful rescuer, trying to negotiate the rough ground in the affected area, bound some large pliant leaves to his feet with grapevines to create crude shoes that enabled him to more efficiently help the injured, and also to provide the ambulatory with foot coverings for the remainder of their escape. His feet that have spent their entire time enclosed are not well suited for scrambling over uneven terrain. But when he had led some initial victims to safety, the moment he turned and crossed back into the zone, his impromptu footwear vanished, and he was forced to fashion another pair. Other rescuers, trained to adapt to the realities of changing situations, quickly gathered natural supplies right at the edge of the line, which could be carried across and assembled on the other side. Another efficient worker sat just inside the safe zone, reaching over the interface to construct sandals, unaware that the arms of her long-sleeved shirt became shorter each time she reached farther in to add a new pair to the growing pile, as reported by one of her co-workers charged with replenishing supplies. In addition to being useful for the immediate tragedy, this methodology provided an essential clue that enabled the world to prepare for the final aftermath, once the event had run its course. And soon all manner of potential material for fashioning makeshift shoes, clothing, bandages, splints and stretchers, to improve on the fireman's hold they had been using, were gathered just outside the affected area, and then carried into it by other volunteers, where an impromptu manufacturing center was established.